All right, welcome to Free Thinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston and the Conscious Resistance Network. My name is Derek Bros. I'm here with Micah Jackson and Johnny. What's going on, guys?
You're on the screen.
I'm right here. I'm still here.
We're all zoomed in.
It's only half of you.
Well, I'm always glad to be on KPFT. Thank you, KPFT, for everything they do. And those that don't know, 100,000 to broadcast ideas on KPFT, and I thank all the shows that do, and I thank everybody that makes the pledge to keep KPFT afloat. Now's a dire time, right, Derek?
Yeah, please do go to kpft.org if you want to contribute, because we've said this a few times to our online audience, those who might not know, but we broadcast this show live on the internet, but it also airs every Friday on 90.1 KPFT on the FM dial here in Houston. And KPFT just celebrated 50 years being on air. And commercial free, corporate free, the kind of stuff that we like and we enjoy. We get to express our opinions as loudly as we like, and
we get to pick the music we like.
We get to play music is whenever we want and whatever music we like. And usually we get to take calls when we are in the studio. So if you want to support, help keep KPFT going, and maybe eventually we get back into the studio taking phone calls.
I can't wait for that day.
Then yeah, please do visit kpft.org and consider making an investment.
I miss the call-ins. I really do, but I do love the chat engagement and the engagement in other
We did the
platforms.
Google call-ins.
Yeah, we miss the call-ins. We miss everybody. MOD, we miss the station, we miss the equipment, and we're thankful still for KPFT and everybody that supports it. We got a lot of local news to get into.
Let's get into
and
it.
I saw this one, and both Derek and I ran into it, of the local narcotics officer that's kind of stepping out amidst the investigation. What's up with that, Derek?
So I was saying this before when we were starting, that's anybody who's paid attention to this show or paid attention to Houston politics or cops and any of that stuff, you've heard of the Tuttle raid, the Tuttle case, Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas killed in their own homes by HPD narcotics unit. Gerald Goins, a couple other officers been charged now, one facing murder. Thousands of cases reviewed.
Who was chief of police when it happened?
Art Acevedo, who the politician / police officer, who, you know, there's just basically, we've gone over this. You guys know they've been absolved of all responsibility. They have not tried to make amends with the family, even though they lied about the members of the family. They claimed there was guns and drugs and made up a whole story that we now know is fake. And we're getting more and more information about this. This latest story says a scrutinized HPD narcotics officer resigns amid investigation. Houston police narcotics officer is now under investigation after he resigned last month. The officer, Juan Martinez, joined the department in 2005. He was assigned to the narcotics division and relieved in July 2016. He resigned August 10th. So it seems like he was relieved of duty, then he resigns. He probably knew that there was, if he was up to whatever he was up to, that they were on to him, because everybody who's probably dirty and is paying attention sees that the investigators are up in that narcotics unit, and that's basically getting them to start investigating anybody who's dirty. I mean, I doubt they're getting all the way to the bottom, though. We know, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, Micah, how the DA's office has been basically using taxpayer money to hire this high profile investigator, but then they've just sidelined him, and he's complaining that they won't even let him be involved in the investigation. But the Chronicle reports several law enforcement sources previously said that Martinez was being investigated for inappropriate conduct related to undercover operations and confidential informants, which we have a huge problem with the undercover officers and informants. After the Chronicle first reported Martinez was being investigated, Chief Art Acevedo told reporters that he was the subject of a proactive internal investigation and promised to provide more information once the investigation had been concluded. And Acevedo just then said that investigators provided evidence to the Harris County DA's office and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District. So it sounds like attempt at federal charges. Both groups declined to prosecute. The department closed an internal administration into the incident after Martinez resigned. And he says, I'm precluded from saying anything further. So that's interesting. They're saying that the local DA's office and like a federal attorney of the Southern District of Texas declined to prosecute whatever this guy's being investigated for. And they still won't tell us, but the HPD is claiming
Sounds
that they're
really transparent.
Yeah, it's totally transparent, right? They're investigating one of their own. They won't tell us what he's being investigated for, potentially trying to get federal charges against him. Nobody's taking them up. And this is a part of the same unit that we know was involved in the Tuttle raid and the murder of 2 Houstonians. So more in as Micah said, the 4th largest city in the empire. We've got a few other local ones I know you guys wanted to get into. Somebody wanted to get this police oversight board. I mean, this is the solution, right? They tell us we need police oversight boards. We need independent boards. But then there's still controversy with them, right?
Yeah. We really need somebody to negotiate with the unions in some senses about officers being charged for their misconduct, or somebody needs to have a stronger voice. You talked about subpoena power as well.
It turns out that Audrey L. Relaford, whose mentally ill son Kenneth was shot and killed by a police officer in 2012, is stepping aside in the oversight board. This is a longtime member. Relaford stands in the intersection where he was shot Thursday, February 11th, and basically talks about what happened. The same officer was involved soon after in another shooting. Sometimes if things happen, they happen again. And the incident has sparked a wrongful death case that HPD challenges the quality of HPD's reviews of all officer-involved shootings from 2009 to 2012. And it sounds like, when you bring up the totals, people need to question them much further. And that was under the outgoing Chief McClellan. And let's get a little deeper into this story. Yeah, what's going on?
I think that's it.
So that's it. That's a.
Well, it shows, like you said, that this is going back to the previous police chief, not the guy we were just talking about, the politician Art Acevedo, but Chief McClellan, who I definitely remember when I first started going out to question HPD. That was the chief that I was dealing with, questioning him about stingrays and other things like that. So I'm sure that his department, his administration was probably up to similar things. And as this case is showing, there's some controversy. This officer involved in a wrongful death case against HPD challenges the quality. I mean, you just said this, but it's interesting. Challenging the quality of HPD reviews of officer-involved shootings, which is, of course, what we're dealing with the Tuttles. It's an officer-involved shooting. And if they would have had their way, they would have just lied about them and, lied about other cases.
It turns out that in a pointed letter to Mayor Sylvester Turner dated last Thursday, board member Kristen Anderson wrote that the civilian police watchdog, don't you love when they close you out of watching something? But wasn't happy as well with the review board. It sounds like, I don't understand what's being.
That happen.
Yeah. So here we go. Does not serve its stated purposes, and it provides cover by making it appear that independent oversight is taking place. So we should think about that a little bit. It's kind of like the cameras providing cover for the narrative. Like you have this,
but they can be conveniently turned off.
Well, that's the whole thing. And like you said earlier, when I interviewed Art Acevedo, the chief of police here in Houston, on the streets during these protests recently, that he was out there trying to act like he's on the side of the people, him and the police union, Grimaldi, said that the people don't want, in some cases they say the people don't want, other cases they say they don't need subpoena power. It's like, no, we already have this oversight board that's technically ended, and they already have the ability to issue reports and do this and that, but they have no real actual subpoena power, and they claim that the people don't want it, which doesn't make any sense, because that's pretty much the only thing.
Down the system.
That's the only guarantee that you're going to for somebody to have to come into the courtroom and testify.
There's a few interesting aspects from the letter I'd like to hit real quick before we move on. The individual tells us that they've served as a member of the board since 2011. So you're talking about someone who's seen it for almost a decade. And after nearly a decade of work, they concluded that the very design of the board itself makes it structurally impossible for it to accomplish the goals articulated in its original charge. Imagine that. I now conclude that my energy would be better focused on projects that rethink policing and do the important transformative work to create safe communities and justice, particularly for marginalized community. The original charge of the board was to, quote, provide a system of increased accountability and transparency, to use that word again, and to facilitate resident input into the internal investigative process of the HPDs.
So, I mean, for those who are just tuning in, you're listening to Freethinker Radio, and this is, I think, part of the ongoing conversation about police violence, police abuse. Should you defund them? Should you, support militarization, whatever, right? When people start talking about solutions, like you're saying, Micah, the body camera gets put forward as a solution to stop police violence, but that hasn't stopped police violence. And as we're going to go over in a bit, police violence is even continuing during pandemic times. But so people say put the body cameras on them, but that doesn't stop things. Sometimes the body cameras aren't on, and then people say, hey, get independent oversight boards. Okay, well, you get a board, but it's not truly independent. It doesn't have any power.
This PhD that went from being a board member for a decade to now arguing that it's useless and should be disbanded because it's actually serving the opposite of its intended purpose. How often do we see
As
that?
in, they can arrest you, but when you try to complain on them, you get nothing but bureaucracy.
Yeah. So this wasn't just some angry person that sat on the board forever. This was an educated individual.
It's like a member of the inside from their team, right?
Yeah, it should be, or at least should be the approachable version of someone who's trying to do something positive for people's lives. with the police review board. Now, whether that's their team or not, that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But there should at least be someone that they speak to.
All right, we're going to continue our look here at police in the Houston area as we continue Freethinker Radio on 90.1 KPFT Houston. And Micah, you also pulled this one up, I think. Bel Air, another city right here in the midst of the city of Houston, now pushing towards surveillance tools that help monitor license plates. We talked about this before. Now it's local. Automatic license plate readers, you know. They're all over the country, but, you know.
Yeah, it's big money, you know. Surveillance is big business, and it's going to be increasingly big business. Turns out that the Bel Air BPDs, the Bel Air Police Department, could soon be using a new surveillance tool to monitor the people, the license plates of cars that travel through the city. The city council approved a measure allowing BPD to submit a request for funding for a pilot program that investigates the utility of automated license plate readers on August 17th. Monday's request considers installing 10 ALPRs on select roadways within the city of Bel Air, capturing license plate information and comparing that information to a national database immediately. The technology will store the images, and you can imagine that this information will get into a database. The technology will store the images on a private server maintained by the private vendor Flock Safety. A little bit of corporatism there.
Well, they have safety in their names. So.
Yeah. According to BPD's request, the quoted price for a 10-camera system will be $27,500, including installation. Small price to be monitored all the time. According to Bel Air's assistant police chief, the system has motion-activated cameras that will photograph every license plate that passes in front of them. The cameras will then compare photos to a national database and will alert the department of any hot list license plates, which might be okay if it stopped there, right? Such as vehicles suspected of being stolen, because obviously somebody was violated to steal their car, or cars connected to Amber Alerts, because, you know, human trafficking, etc. The camera also captures the make, model, and color of vehicles while using artificial intelligence to create a searchable database for use in investigation. The data will be stored on the server for 30 days at least. In the meantime, authorized users within the BPD will be able to access the stored data if it is relevant to any ongoing investigation. I'm just going to kind of stop there, but I did think it was interesting, the little picture they have from the Chronicle. It shows a really awesome Dodge Charger from back in the day, but it also puts the software input on there, and it's like last visit 3:15 p.m. Seen 3 of the last 30 days. Resident no. Oh, might as well pull them over.
Well, see, and this is what I want people to know, that when we're talking about a city of Bel Air that's in the Houston area, but it's technically its own city. No, it's just a small, most people would drive through it and think you're still in Houston because you basically are, but there's a part that they have their own council, their own mayor, their own police force and things like that. So how do you know that you as a Houstonian driving through Bel Air, you know, you're clearly going to get mixed up in the system? And it shows that even one of the council members was asking specifically, like, is this going to be used to monitor people and bother them?
Well, my other thing, I was just
population of Bel Air 16,800.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this as well. I mean, it sounds like a bit of a stretch, but I mean, in China, you know how they have the facial recognition tracking. You know, this is in a way a form of like that same thing. You know, it's just another thing. Like, so you could have your face recognized when you're walking down the street. Well, now you can't drive without, you know, immediately. You know, like your record has to be perfectly clean. And we all, not everyone.
I want to just add to that, Michael. You mentioned the hot list there briefly. Like, yeah, in the best case scenario, it's used to catch some child who's been kidnapped, and an Amber Alert goes out, and they track a vehicle using the automatic license plate readers, and that helps them find them. Right? It's the best case scenario. But I've been writing about this for a number of years as it's grown around the country. We have clear examples of police using this to track, like, for example, one cop thought his wife was cheating on him. And what they can do is they can create hot lists of certain vehicles that, you know, they think, oh, this person might be committing crime or whatever. And it automatically triggers one of their hot lists if the person is in a certain area. So this cop was using it to, like, monitor his wife's behavior and see where she was going and get notifications. So it's clear that these technologies can be abused and can be used for other purposes. So, I mean, hopefully people hearing this, and maybe people here in Bel Air in this part of Houston might actually question it. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody challenging or questioning. And on this show, outside of our regular audience, it does seem like a lot of people in the quote unquote mainstream have already accepted surveillance and don't even see it as much of an inconvenience or think about it that way.
Bel Air is bordered by Houston on a whole bunch of sides, and West University Place on another side. And West University Place installed the readers are manufactured by a different company at all entrances to the city.
I mean, people shouldn't have.
Police cars.
I mean, just think about it. Like, it's not even necessarily the technology that's bad; it's the operators. Like, we can't. There's
no checks and
time and
balances
time
on
again. Yeah, we cannot trust these people using the
It's
technology.
power.
And either way, they're building these profiles on different drivers. So they can see and just be like, make a snap judgment. Like, well, he had this certain past, so might as well pull him over and see what I can get. I'm about to meet. Like, I mean, I'm not saying
Well,
that
the
every
thing
cop
is,
is going to be that way.
all the systems are becoming more and more interconnected. That's the big problem. Is like prior to 9/11, there was some separation, or at least the assumed separation of federal, state, and local. And we can get into the fusion centers later, like that of these systems being integrated, DHS communicating with the local cops, sharing this information.
And also,
and
how secure is their database, anyways?
Probably not. I mean,
like,
even the VA's database.
Police stations have been hacked many times.
And the thing is, also, you got to consider automatic license plate readers in the context of, well, you also have, surveillance cameras, Stingray cameras. You got facial recognition cameras. All these different databases speaking to each other. So it's not just one system. It's like all of this layered on top of each other, multiple systems. So, and just as an example with the fusion centers, there was I read one of the reports in the Blue Weeks documents showed that this cop from Maine pulled over somebody and started questioning him. The person refused to cooperate, which was within their rights because they hadn't done anything wrong. And they told the cop, I'm not going to give you my ID. I'm not going to let you take a picture of me. I'm not going to give you my name. He wouldn't give him anything, right? And the cop kept trying to bug him and question him. And eventually he backed off. But then the cop, after the person drove off and went about their life, the cop went to the local fusion center and was like, hey, can you look at the cameras around there and tell me who they are? Or look them, zoom in on them using this CCTV camera. And then let's use that facial recognition, run it in some databases, run it across social media so I can find out who it was. So they already have all these different systems that they can plug you into if they really want to find out who you are.
I kind of check out some. I appreciate everybody that's engaging in the dialogue.
That's the internet.
The free radicals, Derek. The free radicals. I don't know if that's our friends, the free radicals, or a whole.
No,
other
I don't think
radicals.
so.
Facial recognition, smart
band.
city implementation is already rolled out. We're going to talk about this place at least in Karen.
We're going to be getting into Australia later on for sure.
So
the
Cool
free
Hand
radicals
Puke says if you're doing nothing wrong, nothing to worry about.
Cool Hand Puke. I like that. All right, we appreciate all the comments. If you guys got anything to say, just go ahead and leave it there, and we'll bring you on screen. We're going to continue checking out what's going on in Texas and then expand a little bit wider.
A headline for Houston real quick. Houston City Council approved $2 million art support program. You can get into that if you are into the arts and find out how that is generated and what happens.
Well, tell us a little bit about this defunding the police property tax thing, Mike. I mean, I think the whole situation's all screwed up no matter which way you look at it, but
it turns out that Governor Abbott has, I think it's interesting because we've been talking about defunding the police for a minute, and as long as it's come up in the national dialogue, it's kind of interesting to see the way that some people you think would at least want to join the dialogue are kind of sitting on the sidelines still. We can talk about that after we get into the story. But it turns out that Governor Abbott called for a ban on raising property taxes in any city that cuts police department funding. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, there's so many ways to feel about it. Assailing plans to reduce police budgets as a threat to public safety. So, if you want to look at what police do and start saying maybe we don't have to spend so much money on the police, and maybe to do that we should ask less of them and have them focus on things like murder, rape, theft, and some maybe severe traffic things like that, and cut in that way. That sounds like what I've heard a lot of people talking about for a long time, reducing the size of the state, right? And why, and so then the governor says, well, you can't raise property taxes if you start cutting, just cut any police department funding. That's kind of crazy.
See, that's just
but
a
at the
threat.
same time, if you're for smaller government and reduce police state, this would not be a threat to you. You might actually see this as an incentive to go down to the city council and start arguing for some practical spending on police budgets. Because your property tax is guaranteed not to go up if you can get down there and get them to reduce about what this is saying here.
So if you can take away some money, get them to take away some money from the police, then the governor's going to step in and say, okay, well, now you local bodies can't charge any higher for property taxes, and the people win, basically.
Yes, they get the police focused on, if they do it right, they get the police focused on violent or crimes where there's a victim, because I don't think anybody here on this show advocates violence in any sort of way. So that's really good. And so then you also, at the same time as getting police to be able to focus on what we would see as crimes, I guess, they earn more respect. They get less detracted into other things.
Well,
the money's spent well. Less taxes are taken from the people, and we have less of a police state.
The whole reason he's saying this too,
we know it's not really for our good.
The whole reason he's saying this thing, which is ridiculous, is that Abbott is crying because in Austin they voted to take away millions of dollars away from the cops into other programs.
Not Houston.
No, not in Houston. They gave them more money.
We're doing the opposite. National news.
Houston gave more money. But think about that. Like, this is, to me, is the same thing as when you see these attempts to pass laws that say, like, if you criticize Israel, it's anti-Semitic, and or you're going to lose funding, or just all these. It's just like threats and extortion is what it comes down to. Is like, if you try to defund the police, and not even you're saying like we're going to take away all the money of the police, but think about if we're just like, hey, maybe we're going to take away those tanks they have, and those MRAPs, and those drones, and all those freaking camo and militarized tools. But no, if you do that, like, well, then you. But to me, though, the whole thing I take of it is
focus on the. What we've seen before, where false overtime, false hours, things like that. I mean, start like having
stop arresting people for victimless stuff first of all,
exactly.
and that in a huge way that could take away a lot of the cops' budget. I mean, we've talked about these ideas over
and
the
also
years,
the burden on them. I doubt they really joined up, at least some of them, to be cops. To in the ideal world, to just go be revenue collectors.
I think many cops are conflicted in that sense. Like, they would, like, there's a lot of things they would get their buddies out of because they see them as tenacious or trivial. And those are the same things that maybe should just be considered.
I just think this is one of those issues that most of what we would consider, even though I think it's a false dichotomy, what we consider the left and the right, they ought to be able to have this conversation. It's in both of their interests from what they profess, at least.
But I do agree with you. I think it's a false dichotomy because at the end of the day, it assumes that, for one, the state of Texas and the government, has the right to charge whatever they want on our property taxes, which means you never own it. And then the other hand, we can't decide how much money we want to give to the people who are supposed to be the community protectors. Otherwise, they're going to threaten you this other way. Either way, it's like we're not getting consulted. Well, and he supposedly said that if this plan goes through, it'll start taking place next January. So we'll see if it's just political posturing or whatever. But
I think it's a good dialogue that the people should get involved in. You may not value the constructs of the government or anything, but people do go to City Hall. They go to these things and they present their positions. So all I've got to say is this seems like a really powerful dialogue point for freedom-minded or even social justice-minded people to join the conversation. The more people in the conversation, the more accurate we're going to get something that mirrors what we as a mass want from the police and want from these people. I don't expect us to be satisfied, but the more they know we're talking about it, the less likely they are to act.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next story. We're going to go to music soon. We're going to be playing a song from an old Houston artist, Harold Borup, in just a few moments. But I know Johnny's got this special, close to his heart, hot sauce story he's been dying to tell you guys about. So we're going to get into that.
It's not that much of a story, but...
don't act like you weren't begging to talk about this.
I do love the sauce, man. I'm not going to lie. I'm big on the sauce. And I don't know if you got it on the screen, but yeah, after almost 30 years, the Tears of Joy Hot Sauce Shop is closing on 6th Street in Austin. So if anyone's ever visited Austin and been in a
look at all that sauce,
rare hot sauce store, it's unfortunately going down because of all this COVID stuff. They've been open since 1993, and they started selling tamales and, just moved to awesome spicy things. You can find all kinds of rare sauces here, but unfortunately, the business is going to be over in August. So.
And did they say this was COVID related? Like,
it is COVID related. They said
27 years. Holy crap!
Yeah, they weren't able to survive it.
So that means like the shop's going away. They're not going to be selling their sauce online.
They are selling their sauce online. It says Rush says the website tearsofjoysauces.com will still be there to place orders on your many hot sauces, salsas, and other spicy products he's become known for. So if you want to support and you want to get some interesting hot sauces, check out that website, which is tearsofjoysauces.com.
And we kind of joke about that story, but I mean, it's a very realistic repercussion of what's going on with businesses in COVID-19.
Because it is all those specialty shops.
I liken it to a war of attrition between the bigs who are getting bigger and printing money like there's no tomorrow, and everybody else. And I think that's the most important thing to think about in some ways with your consumer dollar. Think about who's going to survive COVID. Do they need your consumer dollar as much as some of these others? And if you're doing okay, maybe things like this would be good gifts for people. Look for like dynamic ways to spend your consumer dollar that might support your values. I don't know. We're going to go to music. You want to
let's continue on, because we're talking about this business going out of into bankruptcy, and I got this other story that you mentioned. As pandemic stretches on, retail bankruptcies approach highest number in a decade. And this is what I wanted us to hit for a moment, is these are the other realities. People are talking so much about the concerns, of course, about their health. And in the second half of the show, we're going to talk all about some of the things you might not be hearing in the mainstream about COVID-19 and some of the reasons people are asking questions. But there's many folks who are not really considering so much the costs of the economic impact of what's going on. And that's really what we want to focus on here for a moment. So go ahead, Mike.
I think the economic impact of what's going on, it's really important, because I'd like to just point out that we were having severe economic difficulties before this even happened. And afterwards, everybody shut down. So this story gets kind of into it. As coronavirus pandemic casts a long shadow, because, we got to go away with the idea that it's coronavirus that caused this, not politicians, not a broke monetary system, but the coronavirus, right? Casts a long shadow over the U.S. economy. Retail bankruptcies are approaching their highest number in a decade. I saw numbers in the thousands, but this story gets a little bit more focused on retail. Latote, owner of Lord and Taylor, the Taylor Brands, parent company of Men's Warehouse, filed for bankruptcy Sunday. They're the latest retailers pushed to the brink by the pandemic. The addition brings the total retail bankruptcy filings so far this year to 43, according to tracking by S&P Global Market Intelligence. Meanwhile, everybody talks about how it's the best economy ever, right? With 5 months left in the year, there have already been more retail bankruptcies this year than in the past 8 years, according to S&P Global. There were 48 filings by retailers in 2010, according to S&P, following tremendous tumult and financial strain across the industry during the Great Recession. In 2008, 441 retailers filed for bankruptcy, according to S&P. The pandemic has compounded challenges that some retailers faced even before COVID began to spread across the county. Some, such as Lord & Taylor and JCPenney, were already on the rocks, having trouble reaching new customers as e-commerce. This is part of the narrative that I also think is false. As e-commerce brands won more of the young shoppers' attention and dollars, JCPenney and all them have websites from the get-go. They just didn't connect. Others, like Neiman Marcus, were saddled with debt, not saving for a rainy day or a pandemic. Jan Knifen, a retail consultant and former executive at the May department stores, which was eventually folded into Macy's, said for many of the retailers, the pandemic only sped up their likely appearance in bankruptcy court. Yet the coronavirus pandemic quickly pushed them over the edge. Yeah, with everybody not able to shop or go anywhere, imagine that. Shelter-in-place orders temporarily shuttered stores for weeks. Americans' spending habits changed. People actually stopped using their credit cards as much as people coped with pay cuts and job losses, or had less of an appetite for new clothing because of working from home and attending few social gatherings. Or what about just the uncertainty of the future in such an environment? The pandemic could also weaken a typically busy shopping season for apparel retailers. Back to school. I mean, come on, who has to go back to school for your kid's Zoom classroom?
No more fun.
Maybe you can end Black Friday.
No fun school supply shopping.
Yeah, skipping ahead quickly, more bankruptcy filings are expected. The coming months will also reveal which of the bankrupt companies will find a way to survive through new ownership or restructuring, and which ones will be forced to permanently close stores. Picking winners and losers, and we talked about that from the beginning of this on. I mean, this is part of the process of picking winners and losers. It's not just the stimulus dollars that pick them. It's also how they're able to deal with their debt and their restructuring. Knifen said other, including women's apparel store, J. Jill, Chico's, Francesca's, and experimental toy retailer Build-A-Bear. I've heard of so many restaurants that are just nailed too. Pier 1 Imports, we talked about them early. They're gone.
Toys R Us.
Yeah. Toys R Us, Chuck E. Cheese. The list goes on. And I think this is the real thing to notice. Neiman Marcus also, they're just getting beat. Neiman will close its recently opened store at Hudson Yards Mall in New York City. Everybody's leaving some of these big cities. The retail market is just beat. J.C. Penney's, Lucky Brand. It goes on and on. If you just Brooks Brothers, I mean, this is not something that we can just paper over and pretend the economy is fine with all these people collapsing. All these people, think how many people they employ that are just struggling as is, working as maybe a clerk in one of these type of stores.
Well, and I want to reemphasize what you said earlier, Micah, that especially for those listening on KPFT, 90.1 KPFT, you're listening to Freethinker Radio, that this is a story. These stories, I mean, if you've heard our show before, we've been covering this for years now, and these situations do, as Micah mentioned, predate COVID-19. So do not, buy into the assumption that this is only happening because some people can't go to work and this and that. Because I mean, the reality I would say is, Micah, when I go out, people are out shopping, people are out eating, despite the news constantly telling me everybody's staying home, since we're all staying home, I'm like, people are out. Maybe not as many people, but like you said, this was already in the process. Sure, this didn't help, but it's not like this magically
people are
came
still
out of
getting
nowhere.
food.
They're getting that free money for helicopter money, right? 23 Shell oil companies are expected to be bankrupt this year, with $30 billion in debt. We went from 764 rigs are idle now. 176 rigs are the only rigs active in the United States. Only 176 oil rigs. Think about that a little bit. All kinds. Ann Taylor's closing 1,600 stores. But yeah, it goes on and on. So, we see gold and silver spiking. We see the stock market totally disconnected from having customers almost, it seems.
Well, the signs are there, and we've been talking over the months about the Great Reset, Mike. And on that front, you mentioned the stock market. I saw that the World Economic Forum, they said, oh, well, we're thinking of how to create a completely new type of market to monitor and, exchanges, and it'll be digital. And actually, I don't know if you saw, they officially
That'll be the first reset, but it won't be the Great Reset.
They did officially.
It'll be the Bankers Reset instead of the real reset.
It's the Bankers version of the Great Reset.
Yeah.
They did officially introduce the digital dollar bill now. It's been reintroduced, not just the coronavirus talk from months ago. Now it's being reintroduced again. They're actually officially considering it. We're going to go to some music, though, guys. Take a quick break here on Freethinker Radio. We're going to play, as I said, an old Houston artist, Harold Borup. You go this way and I go away. We'll get this song in, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about what's going on in Denver, talking about crime falling during pandemic, and talking about doctors in Germany questioning the pandemic narrative. Imagine that. Maybe people's deaths being falsely attributed. And talking about the police state in Australia and New Zealand. So please do stay tuned. This is Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston. We'll be right back.
Okay, so you can't get her to the hospital on time. You conquer your own fear, and you'll have it by calming her, making her comfortable. You ask her to remove her underclothes.
All right, welcome back to Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston. That was Harold Borup. What is it called again, Micah? You go this way and I'll go away.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I don't know why they got all the cameras on me, but all right, welcome back, guys. Thank you for KPFT for hosting our show here, Freethinker Radio, where we're here every week on the FM airwaves and, of course, across the internet. Right now, we are live on about 5 different Facebook pages.
Let's talk about those things.
We're live on the YouTube channel for the Conscious Resistance. We're also live on float.app for anybody who's looking for a non-Facebook, non-YouTube way to live stream content like this. Check out float, FLOT.app, and you can find out more about that. Speaking of social media, just a real quick mention for those who might not be hip to it, the continued censorship, yes, I said it, censorship of independent media, alternative media, and activists continues on Facebook, as Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg recently just announced a crackdown. The article you're looking at on the screen says a crackdown against anarchists. I would say it's a bit more broad than that, but yes, definitely folks who describe themselves as left-wing anarchists have been taken down off Facebook. I mean, for those
how can you be a wing anarchist?
It says
it's the same as the mainstream left-right division, just another version of it.
Facebook justifies their crackdown by comparing anarchists and anti-fascists to U.S.-based militia organizations and QAnon.
Yeah, they took down like thousands of QAnon
Wow, this
accounts.
is a huge umbrella.
That's what I'm saying. It's really weird. But the common uniting factor, at least according to Facebook, is that these different groups have advocated or celebrated violence or celebrate violence. Some people on the left do advocate and celebrate violence.
I'll say the code.
But yeah, the U.S. military is still able to promote and recruit people through Facebook. And I mean, so clearly Facebook has an agenda and the people they selectively delete. But I'm just saying, I'm sure that not everybody who got deleted is completely innocent of that.
Just one rule for the rulers and one for everybody else again.
And to me, ultimately, and I talked about this a little bit earlier today with some friends, that we've been seeing this since 2016, shadow banning. You know, people used to think that was a fake thing, that they were throttling people's accounts and stopping traffic. We know that's true now from Google whistleblowers and other documents that have come out. People used to say, oh, you're lying, whenever they would unsubscribe people or just delete accounts. Now it's happening left, right. These types of folks, for example, some of these left-wing anarchists might have been some of the people who said, oh, who cares about those right-wing anarchists, the voluntarists, when they were being deleted, when the anti-media was being deleted. And I'm just trying to say that it's unfortunate that people's political divisions keep them from seeing that if they take down this person, they're going to come for you too.
They keep them from standing up for something they might believe in, like a level playing field as far as what we'd like to think about the internet and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, but just wanted to throw that out there. It wasn't a huge story, but it's definitely just a continued, part of
Someone
this.
asked what the article's definition of anarchist was, and I think that might be worth
They don't
talking
have
about.
one.
Well, yeah, so that's what I was saying. That's why I say left-wing anarchist, because specifically it talks about the pages associated with itsgoingdown.org and CrimeThink. And CrimeThink, when I first got into anarchism, it's definitely one of the first things you get exposed to. They run a lot of well-known left-wing sites. They mainly promote like anti-capitalist, kind of anti-white supremacist, more collectivist or communist version of anarchism. And a lot of them do believe in what they call the propaganda of the deed, which is that acts of destruction or even property damage are valid and seen as a tactic that you could employ. And like they don't have any qualms about the use of violence like some people in other philosophical schools of anarchism might. So that's why I'm saying like some of these people might really be the type that actually do advocate in some cases for the use of violence. But I wouldn't say that's all of them. And that doesn't mean it justifies taking their channels down. But yeah, it was specifically It's Going Down in CrimeThink. And those are websites and pages associated more with the left side of anarchism. And then, yeah, it's weird, though, that they lump them in with QAnon types and militia types all in one kind of
So there's
match.
these anarchists that don't believe in rulers
Basically.
that will be violent for a cause. And I assume this cause is something other than preserving their own life.
Yeah, their version is to, like, in order to, I'd say, like, abolish capitalism, then, you have to overthrow the
But the
capitalist
military
class.
is fine.
No, I definitely think they
So
probably
you could
have
go,
issues
like,
with the military.
maybe shoot
These are more
someone
likely the
at
people
court.
the types who are on the streets, like said, let's say in Seattle and Portland, who are trying to like physically fight with the cops. Like these are that now they're being targeted. Whereas and again, for lack of a better term, right anarchists, right libertarians type, we've been getting censored, and I include myself in that. Just that's my personal labeling for years. So that's why I was saying like some of these folks probably laughed whenever the quote unquote conspiracy theorists were getting deleted, or when
'cause they didn't
those
care about
right wing
those issues.
anarchists. Oh, screw them. They're not real anarchists or whatever. But now, again, it's made its way across the spectrum where it's affecting everybody. People have been saying for a while, it's just the conservatives being targeted. It's like, no, I know plenty of anti-media
It's
wasn't
that whole
conservative.
punch right,
Net Press
punch
News
left
wasn't conservative.
mentality
Like, we've been targeted. And so, yeah.
I mean, people don't even know what
It's that whole
conservative
punch
means
left and
anymore.
punch right mentality that lets it go on because they're like, oh, well, it's the opposition's voice. Who cares
exactly.
about the
That's why
whole
they were
principles
scooping
that
people up
means-
in Portland and
Yeah.
nobody took up arms.
Yeah, kind of, because they eliminated that other step right beforehand.
Let's go ahead and jump forward to a story,
Yeah,
Mike. I know
sure,
you had
yeah.
this one about crime dropping. Like, let's.
Yeah, man. How about that? Crime fell in the early months of the pandemic. But fatal shootings didn't slow. I guess that it was offset by the other crime, right? Fatal shootings by members of PDs did not appear to ease up even amid the coronavirus pandemic, as this says, and blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans continue to be disproportionately affected by deadly police shootings compared to white people. A study released Wednesday by the ACLU pandemic, with far fewer people traveling outside their homes and police departments reducing contact with public so as to not spread the virus, police have continued to shoot people at the same rate so far in 2020 as they did during the same period of every year between 2015, 16, 17, 18, 19, which was based on data analysis from the University of Nebraska at Omaha. The day of people fatally shot by police in 2020 over the previous 5 years.
It's almost like there's a pandemic of police violence.
Yeah, go ahead, make people put their mask on, though. We thought maybe police would slow down their killing, could take some time off.
Just like the mayor said, could you all criminals just chill?
From January to June of this year, there were 511 fatal police shootings. Fatal. There's 500 people dead. We talk about the coronavirus and the death count. Well, for police shooting, 500 were dead, according to a report, up from 484 last year. So this is with everybody down. We got, what percent is that? Dang near 7 or so during the same period over the same period last year. During the first 6 months of 2018, there were 550 fatal police shootings. 2017, there were 493. In 2016, there were 498. In 2015, 465. So you get like
Consistently around 500.
yeah, and we're peaking 511 right now. Researchers, and we still got the year left, right? Researchers examined figures from a database maintained by the Washington Post, which has been tracking deadly police shootings through news accounts, social media posts, and police reports in the wake of the 2014 killing of Michael Brown, teenager, by police in Ferguson, Missouri. The database has found that police shootings, fatal ones, remained at a constant of nearly 1,000 per year since 2015, which the Post says can be explained via a probability theory that suggests the quantity of rare events in huge populations tends to remain stable absent major societal changes, such as fundamental shift in police culture. Police culture, think about that, y'all, or extreme restrictions on gun ownership. Researchers said that they wondered if a once-in-a-century public health crisis generated increased social isolation would result in a reduction of police killings. We want to express alarm that even when the nation was on lockdown during the height of the COVID pandemic, that didn't stop police fatality shootings at any rate. Offer said. The report didn't posit why the number of shootings remained at the same level in 2020, although offered that it underscores how policing continued in those months and highlighted that not everyone had the ability to quarantine in a home. So some people were out, you know.
Well, I just want to add to that because I honestly, I would have no problem believing that police violence has continued during this whole thing, but I definitely don't trust the database ran by the Washington Post. That's just me. But just because I know they have their own agendas, but I think that the numbers would pan out whether, the specific numbers are exact or not, because we know that police violence, while maybe not being the number one thing that you're at threat for, I think that generally though, when you consider police interactions, yes, there are plenty of hundreds, let's say thousands of police interactions where nothing goes wrong. But then the ones when they do go wrong, the police have basically immunity and can get away with all kinds of things.
The ACLU report also identified 7 states, Alabama, Alaska, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Montana, and Nevada, having substantially more fatal shootings in the first 6 months of 2020 than past years. So yeah, all kinds of stuff. I'm glad the ACLU is stepping up and saying stuff about that. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we're gonna hit now our COVID.
Houston Police Chief is there.
COVID minute here.
I can't miss this one though. After welcoming a new class of 74 recruits to the police academy this week, Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo said others in the community made clear that they don't want less policing. They want good policing.
Oh, is that what we made clear?
We made it clear whenever we went and protested and tried to get him to change.
He got a little bit more face time in the media there. That's from actually NBC. It seems like our police chief is in the news all over the country.
All right, we're going to move on now. We got about 10 minutes left for the KPFT edition of the show, and I know that there's a few more important stories. Particularly, we haven't talked much about COVID itself. We've talked about the impacts of COVID, the economic impacts, what's happening with cops during COVID. But now we're talking about some stories that are actually, I think, maybe, hopefully, maybe bringing up some questions in your mind, especially KPFT audience. I can hear everything right next to it. This report here is saying that German doctors this past week held looks like some sort of council. I mean, I can't read the exact language because it is in German, but we have this report from Collective Evolution that shows that 500 German doctors and scientists have signed on as representatives of an organization called the Corona Extra Parliamentary Inquiry Committee to investigate what's happening on our planet with regards to COVID-19. Now, again, it's funny to me because Collective Evolution, I know that this is not necessarily a news source that many people would consider to be credible or maybe mainstream enough for you just based on the name, but they even have to address that. The article itself says, is this article fake news? No, and it's like they're sort of prefacing it in preparation for fact checkers saying, we're literally just quoting from this council, this committee. You can say that you think the committee's wrong, but the fact is we're reporting on something that happened. So it can't be fake
now
news.
We have to add that caveat.
But yeah,
every single article we write.
Well, they even ask, like, is this fake news? No, because we're actually quoting. So I just wanted to put that out there for those who are like, oh my God, these people are claiming that. Because again, the doctors themselves say we have a lot of evidence that it's a fake story all over the world. What do they mean by that? They start talking about how they believe that the World Health Organization is misrepresenting the facts, and specifically in Germany. They basically said that they were established to investigate all things that pertain to the new coronavirus, such as the severity of the virus and whether or not the actions taken by governments around the world, including lockdowns, are justified or causing more harm. So this is a little statement from them. As the Corona Extra Parliamentary Inquiry Committee, we will investigate why these restrictive measures were imposed upon us in our country as part of COVID-19. Why people are suffering now and whether there is proportionality of the measures of the disease caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus. So basically, is it justified, for everything happening? We have serious doubts that these measures are proportionate. This needs to be examined. And since the parliaments, neither the opposition parties nor the ruling parties have convened a committee, and it is not even planned, it is high time that we took this into our own hands. We will invite and hear experts here in the Corona Speaker Group. These are experts from all areas of life: medicine, social affairs, law, economics, and many more. And they have a website with the full English transcripts of everything they're studying. The group has given multiple conferences in Germany, and one of the most recent, Dr. Heiko Schoening, one of the organization's leaders, said, quote, "We have a lot of evidence that the new coronavirus, is a fake story all over the world." Now, he isn't saying the virus itself is fake, but he's saying that it's not more dangerous, and these are his words, don't sue me, than the seasonal flu, or equally dangerous, in that these measures that are being taken around the world, some of what we're going to talk about, the police state, are basically not justified. And that a report published by the British Medical Journal has also suggested that quarantine measures in the UK as a result of COVID-19 may have already killed more UK seniors during than coronavirus did at its peak. So real life consequences. Micah talked about the economic consequences. Johnny's talking about sauce, and all these are all real world things going on. That's what these doctors are trying to examine. Is there truth behind the claims? And it's just more information to kind of stick in your knowledge base and ask about what's really happening. And I know, Johnny, you got a couple others in Denver.
Yeah, I got a couple quick ones. I'm not doing the Denver one, I can do that one first. Yeah. So Denver doctors may have found the answer to a pandemic mystery, which was what happened to all the heart attacks. When the new coronavirus first swept through Colorado earlier this year, baffling doctors with its myriad of symptoms and methods of spread, Dr. Brian Stauffer, the head of cardiology at Denver Health, soon began to notice a different kind of pandemic mystery. People, it seemed, had stopped having heart attacks. So it says here, at Denver Health and other large hospitals across the metro area, the number of people showing up with cardiac emergencies dropped significantly as the state imposed increasingly strict measures, encouraging people to stay at home to slow the virus. And this was not unique to Colorado. Hospitals across the country and in Europe documented the same phenomenon, had stay-at-home orders somehow also slowed heart attacks, or were people in need of medical help and they were simply just not seeking it because of the fear of COVID-19. So he did a new study from Stauffer and several Denver Health colleagues, offers the first clue to the answer in Colorado. Looking at data on ambulance calls in Denver, they found that while overall calls for service went down during the stay-at-home period, the number of people dying from cardiac arrests at home shot up. Stauffer's team found that cardiac arrests at home in Denver more than doubled in 2 weeks after a statewide stay-at-home order was issued, compared with historical averages. Even compared to more recent data, the weekly average of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests jumped to 46 during those 2 weeks versus 26 or 27 in the 3 months prior. So it's just another side effect, of the pandemic. A lot of people are having other medical issues. You feel something a little bit wrong with your heart, and many people already are don't really go to the hospital when they think something's wrong for the simple fear of that. But if they think that they might contract something else, then they're really going to be afraid. And unfortunately, it's not working out for a lot of people.
People are just getting afraid, and then they don't go to the hospital. They die. They die at home.
It's really sad. And it says heart disease is actually in Colorado 2020. Heart disease still has more deaths than COVID right here. Cancer has 4,318, heart disease 4,095, and COVID has 1,377. So there's still
almost as many as
like 3 times as much people die of heart disease still.
How many die? What is that in the whole nation, or
this Colorado? Is just Colorado? Yeah, wow, this is just Colorado, but I'm sure it's probably similar. I know heart disease is the #1 killer in America. Yeah, and if you want to jump over, I got this other story here. This is just another case of, numbers being misrepresented, died for other reasons. 10% of Rhode Island coronavirus deaths are not caused by COVID-19.
says Rhode Island officials on Wednesday revealed about 10% of the state's 1,027 coronavirus-associated deaths happened for reasons that were unrelated to the coronavirus disease. In accordance with federal standards, the Rhode Island Department of Health
How often does this happen?
Huh? Well, yeah, I think they bring up a motorcycle accident in this one as well. Like in accordance with federal standards, the Rhode Island Department of Health defines coronavirus-associated deaths as anyone who dies after recently testing positive for the disease.
Car crash.
So there we go, Dr. Burks and her liberal,
How do they define
counting.
recently?
So if you die on the way
How
home
do they
from a
define
testing,
recently?
you died of COVID.
How do they define death?
So that exact reporting methods evoke criticism. I wonder why. Saying that someone who dies in a car crash shouldn't necessarily be included in the state's death toll.
Necessarily.
I mean,
they could have been caused by COVID because they were coughing from their respiratory thing, and then
that's the kind of things that the doctors were saying in Florida.
I heard him say George Floyd.
It says here, health director, and I mean, these aren't just random people bringing it up. It's
the health director.
Yeah.
Put him on blast. Nicole Alexander Scott.
Yeah, said Wednesday on her department. It's a girl. Yeah. Wednesday, her department is now in the process of identifying those types of deaths. Initial results show about 90% of deaths are directly tied to the disease. About 10% are unrelated, according. And she said, quote, "What we're seeing now is that the majority of cases are deaths that have occurred because of COVID," she said during a weekly news conference, and also, quote, "But we're continuing to develop the process for determining when it's associated, but not necessarily caused by COVID," i.e., they still haven't figured out how to count this.
How many months into this thing?
So yeah, so we're still counting it all wrong, and it's they're saying 10%, the 10% error, and it could be more than that, but
this just reminds me though of what we covered about a month ago.
Over 100
here
deaths,
in Texas,
just over 100 deaths
with the Collin County Commissioner report, when they said the same thing, that like, hey, we're going to see a rise in deaths because deaths are being falsely or closely attributed.
And in the UK
and a number of places, I'll add this that I just read today. Collin County here in Texas, revisiting that same place, they've now added a disclaimer on their numbers website saying we have no faith in the like. This is literally from the Collin County Commissioner's Court,
where you go
to look for count. It says we have no faith in the Texas Department of Health and Services data.
You should pull that.
So they kind of added.
I want to see that.
A caveat. Yeah, but
that's ridiculous, man.
Micah, you got one as well, a Lancet study. That
yeah, let's just get into it quickly. It's an unprecedented global social and economic crisis, right? It triggers the COVID-19 pandemic, poses grave risks to the nutritional status of several and survival of young children in low-income and middle-income countries. Of particular concern is an expected increase in child malnutrition, including wasting, due to steep declines in household incomes, changes in the availability and affordability of nutritious foods, and interruptions to health, nutrition, and social protection services. 1 in 10 deaths among children younger than 5 years in these low and middle income countries is attributed to severe wasting, because wasted children are at increased risk of mortality from infectious diseases. They don't have the nutrition they need to even form the antibodies. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, an estimated 47 million children younger than 5 years were moderately or severely wasted. And the economic, food, and health systems disruptions during COVID are expected to continue to exacerbate all forms of malnutrition. Estimates from the International Food Policy Research Institute suggest that because of pandemic, an additional 140 million people will be thrown into living in extreme poverty on less than $1.90 per day in 2020. According to the World Food Program, the number of people in the low and middle income countries facing acute food insecurity will nearly double to 265 million by the end. And I don't know how much time we got, but these numbers, I could keep going. It's startling. I mean, it's just unnerving that we've done such things, and these nations have done such things, to avoid this thing that seems to have a really small death rate. But it's turning out that, in here, there's a new study that shows corona restrictions and lockdowns are leading to more than 10,000 deaths per month, like the lockdowns are. and this is what we're not talking about, and this is a global study. It's been 7 months since the first COVID-19 cases were reported, and it's increasingly clear that the repercussions of the pandemic are causing more harm to the children than the disease itself. That's the UNICEF executive director. Household poverty and food insecurity rates have increased. So, maybe it's time to start growing some things. The study conducted by researchers at Johns Hopkins University and published in the Lancet Medical Journal, this is on Freethinker Radio, and I'm sure Derek will get it in the comments, said that hunger stemming from coronavirus restrictions is causing the deaths of 10,000 children per month, and stunting the growth of another 550,000 per month. I want to think about the social growth of children that can't go to school, all these other things besides just these immediate fatalities. But the cost of these restrictions.
That's really sad, and that's exactly what those German scientists were talking about. And they're just extrapolating it to their own country. But
they're talking about all the
they're talking about the cost versus the cost of the pandemic, letting it run its course, and the cost of lockdowns,
unintended consequences, perhaps. But
calm down.
No, it's very loud when you guys do that.
Why'd you do that? And keep talking about how loud it is when we do that.
I'll edit it all out. Don't worry. So, guys, one other story I do want to cover as we wrap up. This probably won't make the KPFT version
so we
of the
can make
show.
noise and you'll edit it out. We can make you do things.
Oh, all of this I'm going to have to edit out. So please,
all
right. Please do. So what we're going to cover now, these last couple minutes here as we wind down, of course, this is Freethinker Radio, 90.1 KPFT Houston, and on the Conscious Resistance Network. We appreciate everybody who's been listening, everybody who's given us thumbs up. No thumbs up means you're going to the quarantine center. We're sending you to Australia or one of these places. And I don't say that as a joke. Unfortunately,
we're going to get you a vacation. Flights are cheap right now.
Apparently, you can get free flights to Australia. But what I'm showing on screen right now, guys, is just one example of the sort of growth of the police state, totalitarian. And I don't mean that in any exaggeration of the word, of what's happening in Australia. We talked about this last week. We played the clip of the police officer talking about roving officers going around, breaking people's windows, dragging them out of the windows if they didn't give them their information. All that stuff.
Set up a roadblock.
Set up checkpoints. So now look at this one on screen. Should people in lockdown in Australia be made to wear a tracking bracelet? This is what they're considering now implementing. There's just a short.
See, it's not a microchip.
It says, should people in lockdown in Australia wear a tracking bracelet? Yeah, it's not necessarily an ankle monitor. It's called Safe.
It's on the outside of their skin. It's okay.
And Singapore has already introduced a new tracking bracelet that all travelers to the country must wear upon entry. So that's what's going on. That's also being considered in Australia. We also have this other one. Well, let me focus on Australia for a minute. Yesterday, the Prime Minister of Australia, Scott Morrison, he says that we need to make coronavirus as mandatory as possible. The vaccine is going to make it as mandatory as possible. So that's what the Prime Minister, I think he's
sure hungry for that.
I think he's since kind of back off his statement and said, well, what I meant was something or other, but it's clear that's what his intentions are.
As mandatory as possible sounds just as bad. It's just 2 more words.
Then we have everything we talked about last week with, like I said, the checkpoints, arresting people who aren't giving up their information, breaking people's windows, roving police officers for people who aren't in the proper places. And now also New Zealand's been joining the fun. New Zealand is now putting all confirmed cases of people to be put in quarantine facilities because they said they're serious about stopping the spread. And you can't stay in your home because you might get your family sick. So they've created quarantine centers now. And this is after—
That makes me want to get tested.
The best part of it all, though, this is after 4 cases. They were off lockdown. They're like, oh, New Zealand beat the coronavirus, and then 4 new cases pop up, and the Prime Minister and the leadership steps in and says, all right, well, now we're creating quarantine centers for people. So you have that going on. And the 2 things that unite these places, I'll be doing a video deeper in depth on this tomorrow. Both of them do not have the right to own weapons, to own guns. Both of them have been disarmed. Also, both of them are essentially just former colonies of the British Empire. I mean, the United States as well. And the final thing I want to note that kind of goes into all the stories we just talked about, the food things Michael was covering, the German doctors and Denver and everything. This study was just released July 29th. It says that it's called On My Mind, They Blinded Us from Science. And it shows how many people across the country are misunderstanding coronavirus. This is pretty interesting. It says specifically that Americans misperceive the risks from COVID-19 for different ages. And the misperception is greater for those who identify as Democrats and for those who rely on social media for information, partisanship, and misinformation. But this is the main ways people seem to be misunderstanding. It says 6 months into this pandemic, Americans dramatically misunderstand the risk of dying. On average, Now listen close here. Americans believe that people aged 55 and older account for just over half the deaths. You get that? So they're saying people 55 and older, just for over half the deaths, the actual figure is 92%. So the vast majority of people are 55 and older, and people, again, who've got pre-existing conditions. Americans also believe that the people aged 44 and younger account for about 30% of deaths. The actual figure, 2.7%, if you even trust their numbers. But so think about that. People think at least a third of the people are in the 44-year-old and younger range.
I've been seeing that with the children thing, with the schools argument, because the numbers for children are ridiculous.
It gets even better, though. Americans overestimate the risk of death from COVID for people aged 24 and younger by a factor of 50. And they think the risk for people aged 65 and older is half of what it is. So they actually believe the risk is 40, but it's 80% for people 65 and older.
So if you don't do that, you're not American, is what they say? You don't think these things?
Well, remember the USA Today editorials already said, the American patriotic thing is going to be to get the vaccine. But just think about that. Like, that great misinterpretation and misunderstanding of such a massive event that is leading people to lock people down, like you said, Micah, put people in situations of starvation, closing down businesses, not to mention the violations of civil liberties, making people, like, depression's gone up, child abuse has gone up, domestic abuse has gone up, jobs, all these different things. And they're clearly saying that people don't even understand what's going on. They don't even understand the numbers. They have like a complete exaggeration in their mind of how bad it is.
Maybe there should be some info jams about that. Yeah,
like,
get the facts out.
I mean, that's
if you want to get in a fight,
you don't even have to say like you think this is a quote unquote pandemic or that things are fake, to just say, hey, you might have heard wrong numbers. Look, here's the actual numbers. I don't think people really know about that, but also based on my recent experience talking to people online, they're probably okay with it as long as it means it keeps them safe.
Kill some kids as long as you keep the mask on.
Yeah, because it's more about the collective than the individual, right? If it's good for the whole, then it's good for you, Micah.
They shouldn't have been so hungry.
Just need to accept it. Yeah, those kids don't need that food. You don't need that hot sauce, Johnny. People don't need to work. People don't need to go out and enjoy the beach and enjoy. You need to be in your proper places.
Frowning with a mask on.
You need to be wearing a mask and social distance. All right, guys.
Having a heart attack.
Hey, suicide's not the answer.
We're out of here, guys. We'll be back next Friday. Free Thinker Radio. Next Tuesday. We'll be back next week at some point. We're going to end with Lion Among Men.
Tomorrow.
And if you want to hear this again, you can find us. We now have a page on or a feed on Stitcher, and we've got an RSS feed that I'll post the link in the description. And of course, you can hear us Friday afternoons on 90.1 KPFT Houston.
What's alternate to YouTube?
YouTube,
Library.
Alternate Library, BitChute, all of our videos are there.
Live.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. This is Free Thinker Radio. Enjoy
Peace.
Lion Among Men. Peace.
Savannah, my arms are waiting here for ya. Run and jump to me if you wanna, 'cause I won't let you fall. Now I've met pretty much everything I've said, besides those 3 words that you dread. I'll never say them again. If there's anything, a star in the sky, I try my best to reach it at night. But if things change again tomorrow, I'll try for Savannah. Savannah. The problem, love at first sight. Just tell me it feels right. Feels right. Just tell me it feels right. Just tell me it feels right. Where's the catch? sky. Well, I try my best to reach it at night, but